Hi, this is John Pettigrew, and you're listening to Talking Through My Hat, a podcast that explores bookish businesses, the fantastic people who create them, and what those people have learned. I'm a hat wearer, a recovering editor, and the creator of Future Proofs, enabling editors and authors to work better online. To find out more, visit wearefutureproofs.com or follow me on Twitter at John_Pettigrew. Welcome to this week's Talking Through My Hat. Today I'm talking with Kevin Duffy, co-founder of Bluemoose Books. Kevin's been in publishing for 30 years, and back in 2006, he and his wife mortgaged their house to start their own publishing company, Bluemoose, with the aim of publishing new and exciting voices. Since then, their books have been sold in 82 countries and had rights sold to British TV and Hollywood. So welcome to the podcast, Kevin.
Hello, and good morning, everybody.
Yeah. That introduction to Bluemoose does lead directly, I guess, to my first question. Why on earth did you set up a publishing company?
I've been in publishing for about 20 years then, 20-odd years. And I got into, in 1986, when Headline first started. I was a sales rep in London and the suburbs. But I won a writing competition in 1998, a national writing competition, and was kind of whisked down to London to meet the editorial director of Macmillan and an editor from Curtis Brown, whose double barrel name I got wrong, and she didn't speak to me for the rest of the meal, which is a bit of a disaster. And I did the stupid thing that most Northerners do and just kind of drank too much, and it didn't go well. And 2 years later, I read in the bookseller that all the big money for advances was going to Irish writers. So I changed my name to Colm O'Driscoll and wrote to Darley Anderson, who loved the book, etc., but tried to contact me via the telephone. But obviously I didn't exist in the Hebden Bridge. So he wrote me a letter, and I spoke to him. But I had to speak to him for 12 months as an Irish person. And I signed a contract, went down to London. I actually lied to my sons and said, if a posh man from London rings up called Darley and wants to speak to Kevin, I'm not Kevin, I'm Colm O'Driscoll. So I was desperate to get published. And I signed a contract, and I wrote a book, and it didn't get picked up. The MBA had gone by then, the netbook agreement, and the big corporates were becoming less, they were becoming much more risk-averse to, new writers, and especially kind of writers within humour. And the whole industry was changing. And the bigger publishers were buying up smaller publishers, and it was all about share price and building publishing. And so I was kind of a bit peed off, obviously, came back and got my book back in 2003 and was moping around and was full of bile and anger, and the head said, well, do something about it. So that's why we set up Bluemoose to publish my book, but also I didn't want it to be just purely a vanity project. Because going around the UK, looking after kind of the key accounts, I was speaking to Waterstones and the library suppliers and wholesalers, and just asking what new writers were on the kind of block, and they were kind of quite dismissive in saying it's kind of the bigger publishers tend to are replicating the successes they've already had, and the number of new writers coming into or getting their books published is reducing massively because of the economic imperative of having to have a hit, because the discount structure of the high street had changed overnight. Basically, Amazon had come on in the late 90s, and so they were just saying it's really difficult to find, and especially in the library market, for kind of new writers with new voices to get published. So we published my book and a book by a Canadian author called Nathan Vanek, called The Bridge Between, having set up Bluemoose Books, and we just started kind of regionally around the north of England with libraries and built the company from there. So it started small and has grown kind of organically. But that's why Bluemoose was started. So it's kind of out of bile and anger from the industry, not really. And I suppose there's vanity on my behalf as well. I can't not say that. But kind of our mantra is, if literature is about anything, it's about finding new voices and new talent and getting their books out. And I think you can see with lots of the literary prizes over the last 10 years, most of the books that have been longlisted and shortlisted and winning, as we have won national and international prizes, the books have been published by smaller independent presses, because we are reading more manuscripts that from new writers and new voices, given that the bigger publishers do not read unsolicited submissions anymore and use agents. We can probably talk about agents at a later date. And I think that part of the industry, no one's talking about how new writers get their work published, and what agents are looking for, and the business model of publishing, given that we are in the entertainment industry. So that's how we started, and we built and built and built until 12 years ago. We made enough money out of the 2 books we initially published in 2006 to continue.
Great.
So that's how we started.
And that trend's continued, you think, that the bigger publishers are effectively almost kind of resting on their laurels and just doing what's safe and what they've done before.
It's replicating those successes they've already had and looking to other publishers and see what brings in the kind of the big money straight away. We've lost 2 authors we worked with for 7 years. One to HarperCollins, Michael Stewart, in the last 12 months, and Benjamin Myers, who wrote The Gallows Pole, which won the world's leading literary prize for historical fiction, the £25,000 Walter Scott Prize. Bloomsbury will be publishing his next book, but they have licensed his backlist from me, his 3 books that we published.
So you've still got some return coming from that.
We obviously got some interest in there because we get a percentage. And we got some money up front. But I think lots of the smaller publishers, I know lots of the smaller publishers are doing most of the heavy lifting in regards to literary fiction, in finding the new verses and working with them. Yeah.
So there's the kind of author discovery part of it. I mean, is the career nurturing part of it a big part of what you see your job as well then? So not just find the new authors, but get them through several books and help them to grow as writers.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw in the bookseller yesterday, but I made an announcement. We're publishing a book by Ronan Hession, an Irish writer who lives in Dublin, called Leonard and Hungry Paul, on March the 20th. The Radio 2 Book Club have chosen it as their book club choice for March.
Excellent.
And I've just signed up Will Wright for his next 2 books going up to 2024.
Right.
So we will be publishing his first 3 novels over the period of 6-7 years, and that's part of what we're about as well. I think it's really important for the career of the writer, because there's nothing worse than a supposed wunderkind at 24, 25 getting a 6-figure advance, but the sales not replicating the advance. And the most important people, or most powerful people in publishing these days, it used to be the commissioning editor, is now the sales and marketing person. And if your sales graph isn't going in the right direction, you will be dropped.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was talking to Dominic Rackart of Source Books on the podcast a couple of months ago, and she has a similar kind of approach, that it's about nurturing authors and building author careers, finding the good people. Obviously, it's a very different space that she operates in, but it's that interesting thing. It's building the author brand was something she was very keen on. It sounds like you're on the same sort of page there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm talking to the industry, the Publishers Association, IPG, and other smaller independents, to see whether within contracts we can have some kind of finder's fee. That if an author I won't say poach, but leaves to go to another publisher because they've offered money that we can't possibly match, they then have a massive hit. Similar to kind of the smaller football clubs, their business model is that if they nurture a player from the age of 7 and then they sell them on to Man City or Man United, then they get a small percentage of the fee. And I think within literary fiction, which is a small part of the publishing pie, something like that has to be at least looked at, because we are doing the R&D for the bigger corporates, because they come in and then snaffle our writers, and we've worked with them. And as an editor, you will know the editorial process is the most important process in publishing for us anyway. And not only financially, but kind of emotionally and critically.
Yeah, I mean, it's the unique part of what the industry is about.
Yeah, of course.
And it almost sounds like you're describing yourself and kind of that tier of publishers as kind of almost a second tier of agents, because you're doing that discovery and you're doing the promotion, but you're then doing a lot more than an agent obviously can. You're getting them in front of an audience directly. Yeah. And then if they move, up the size chain to a HarperCollins or a Bloomsbury or whatever, can you get a commission cut in the same way that an agent might for that work?
Yeah, and of course agents would hate that.
Yes, because it eats into the available commission.
Of course. I mean, One author, and I won't name the author, their book was published by a much bigger publisher. They had 7 different editors for that book. Now, that can't be good for the book itself and for the author, because
work committee is never ideal.
One of the great things of what we do is that continuity and working with an editor over 18 months.
Mm.
And it's about building trust as well.
Yes.
And if you're getting 7 different voices, it can't help.
No.
It can't. And what editors do and what we do is to make that manuscript the best it can possibly be. But if the person who's kind of controlling the process is changing,
if the direction keeps changing,
it has an effect.
You're not going to travel in a true line, are you?
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned agents earlier. I get the impression you're kind of quite keen on unsolicited manuscripts and submissions. Is that?
Well, I think we do. We read kind of everything that comes in. The first 3 chapters in the synopsis, and I do think that's why smaller publishers are being shortlisted for lots of the major prizes, because we are reading more new voices.
Yeah.
I think the agent model whereby they're the gatekeepers. Mm. There is an issue. Now, there are some brilliant editors and there are not some brilliant editors. But I do think that to a certain extent, agents are only taking on those books, and this is a generalization, are only taking on mostly those books that they can see that they will get a return on. We will publish an author where we say, well, perhaps their first book won't sell particularly well, but you can see the trajectory of their writing career, and you will, make money on book 2 or 3 or book 3 or book 4. Yeah. We're small enough to do that, and I understand the economic imperatives of the larger publishers because they've got shareholders and they have got kind of, fiscal demands. I don't shy away from that. But I think as a smaller, more flexible kind of operation, we are just reading more new voices, and much more talent is coming, that awful word, through our pipeline, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, it almost seems slightly peculiar in a sense, because the way you're describing it, that smaller businesses are able to take a longer-term view of the author than the big businesses, which are taking a very short-term view of an author on a particular book, which should be the other way round, because a big company has the resources to bear with somebody until they become a success, whereas a small company has much less resource. Does that seem the wrong way around?
Yeah, the big fear with the bigger publishers is that the big 5 corporates are all desperate to get the big book.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So they compete for the big book, or what they deem the big book, or the big author. And then that ratchets up the kind of auction price of the advance. But if you are paying, a 6 or even a 7-figure fee, you have then got to match that with a marketing budget of us. And so the publishing pie just becomes smaller.
Yeah.
And the pitch to, the finance director would be, but surely if you invest a 6-figure fee amongst 20 new writers, of those 20 new writers, and for your backlist, and the backlist is the most important thing of any business, publishing business, in the future, 10 of your new writers will be earning money for you for the next 50 years, because there'll be quality there as well.
Yeah.
And I just don't, it's the short-termism could not kill the industry, but it's an issue.
Damaging it, yeah. It's the same thing you see a lot of across a lot of companies. This I say the shareholder view that the company should be acting in the short-term interest of its shareholders rather than the long-term interest of the business or the industry, or indeed, heaven forbid, its authors.
Yeah.
It's kind of perverse. It's one of the great advantages, I think, of private companies rather than public companies, that you can act as you see fit. And you've got a almost a mission that is what you're there for.
We always, and I think one of the reasons why we're reasonably successful is that we always say that we're a publishing company, but we're readers and writers as well. And all our editors have such a kind of eclectic and diverse reading tastes that if we all come to a conclusion, we might not like a particular book, but if individually, but if we all think there's something there, then I know I can find readers then. Yeah,
it's always the difficulty, isn't it? Particularly with fiction, it's the telling the difference between it's not my taste and it's not good, or indeed it won't sell.
Of course, yeah.
But then that's where the skill comes in, isn't it?
Yeah, my background was within sales and marketing. I don't actually edit, but we've got kind of 4 brilliant editors, and they're worth their weight in gold.
Yeah.
And I don't think editors get enough credit within the industry.
I'll take that as
yeah. I mean, you've got
but...
the kind of the nibbies and stuff like that, but you never get kind of best editor. You might get, the best public relations person for a book that's become a million seller will win an award.
Yeah.
But the editor won't win an award that has probably helped the author more than anyone else within that particular company.
I mean, it's interesting. You've clearly always had an idea of where Bluemoose should be going, but have you found it went in the direction you expected? Or, I mean, obviously, time and scale and stuff, that things always go slower or faster than we expect, generally slower. But has the direction gone where you planned?
I'm not a great planner, and that might be to the detriment of the business, but we're always kind of led by the wonderful new books that we think we've found. Mm-hmm. And I know that might sound very simplistic, but I think if you have a passion in what you're doing and what you're publishing, then publishing is quite easy, because you kind of then get the blinkers on and think, this is a wonderful book. I now have to then go and find readers for it.
Yeah.
And so the travel has always been in the same direction, i.e. to find new voices and new talent. So that's the direction of the business as well. But I would never want to get, and perhaps this is my control freak, I would never want to get too big that I wasn't working with the authors on a kind of daily basis as well.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important. We're almost like a kind of a family working together.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't, heaven forfend that you become Penguin Random House or whatever, where you're just controlling numbers. To me, and I think the feedback we get from kind of readers is that they love the idea of that one independence, but we're all working together in the same direction.
Yeah,
is to get wonderful stories into readers' hands, and that's what we're all trying to do, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, and that culture of your business, the way you go about it, it does come through to your customers, just in the way in the kinds of things you do and how it's presented. I mean, is that something that you've consciously worked on, or is it just that something that's kind of grown up because that's kind of how you are?
I think it's basically who we are. And there's a bit of kind of belligerence in there as well. I mean, you have to have that kind of, not sticking a middle finger up to London, but we still get called a provincial publisher or a regional publisher. Totally. And it's, that's quite disparaging. I mean, I've had agents on the phone who're ringing up, and again, it's all very subjective whether you like something or not. And I've turned a particular author down, and they've then said, but don't forget, Kevin, you're not a London publishing house. And it's those kind of terms that the industry has to address, because there is still a massive amount of snobbery within publishing. And no one really addresses the class issue. I mean, I remember a sales and marketing meeting many years ago, the Monday morning meetings when we discuss it. You open your mouth and straight away people are calling you the brusque one from the north, because they ask your opinion and you give it. But that's still a massive issue.
It is. It is. I mean, I remember when I was looking for my first job in publishing, it was back in the 90s. I was up in Manchester because I'm a northern lad, and everything was in the south, and I just couldn't understand why there were no publishing jobs, even in Birmingham, in Manchester, in Leeds, in whatever. There's one or two, and it's not really improved. I mean, if anything, it's got worse. I think more jobs moving down to London. And how are you supposed to, particularly if you're trying to attract new people into the industry? How is London going to help with that when it's insanely expensive?
Well, the cost. Well, that's why we started the Northern Fiction Alliance. There's 10 publishers. And we, at the London Book Fair last year, we threw a provocation to the industry, saying that, why won't you, open up a satellite office or, move some of your editorial up? Because the talent pool isn't all in London. It can't be. There's 45 million people live outside London, and there is great talent, be it fantastic writers, but also fantastic editors, designers, illustrators, proofreaders, etc. And I just think economically, as everyone's fighting for people's time now, be it the gaming industry or the publishing industry or the film industry, you look at the costs of actually having a building in London is astronomical. Astronomical. But then, having spoken to several leading people within, some of the 5 corporates, they're saying, but the agents are in London and we need to be there. And the cultural kudos of London would suggest to me that people are still not questioning whether they should move out of London.
Yeah.
And I did ask someone, so you're saying that agents are actually controlling the industry? And that just seems a bit weird. I mean, again, I was throwing a hand grenade in. But, the industry should be, obviously, you have your kind of, we all have to make money and stuff like that. But within literary fiction, it's all about the books and the stories. So the most important for me, and should always be, are the people who create the wonderful, wonderful books.
Yeah, it's always seemed odd to me because I say my first publishing job was at Elsevier. It was in Cambridge, why I'm still in Cambridge now. They moved to London about 3 years later, and I took redundancy and became a freelancer for a bit their reason for moving to London was to be at the hub of the electronic communications network. And it's a case of how you may have misunderstood what an electronic communication network is for. You don't need to be in London to talk to agents because there are telephones and email and video and trains. But I mean, it's interesting though, as you're saying, you have clearly a very strong mission to find new voices. To what respect do you think that ties into this regionality thing? Because you're firmly based in the north, you've got a definite identity that's part of. Yeah. And we see this monoculture, this London monoculture, that kind of people are going, oh, isn't it a shame that we're all so very much the same, white, middle-class, university-educated Southerners? Yeah. I mean, do you think that's part of why they can't find the new voices? They need people in other places with other viewpoints.
And also kind of our education system as well. The people who are making the commissioning decisions, not everybody, but the vast majority of them, have had a similar upbringing. Yeah. So they've probably gone to a public school. They've probably gone to either a red brick university or Oxbridge. And so their life experiences and their reading experiences are obviously I won't say kind of controlled by their own, but it's influenced by their upbringing. Yeah. So if I give you an example, Ben Myers, who's our best-selling author ever and has gone to Bloomsbury, he had a publishing deal with Picador for a 2-book deal, and his first book was called Richard, which was a reimagining of Richie from the Manic Street Preachers, who is presumed committed suicide because his clothes were found on Clifton Suspension Bridge. And so, and they were going to publish his second book, and his second book was about a travelling community, fighting a guy who was a bare-knuckle boxer and his son, and it was about their relationship. And it was about a young man escaping the violence of his family and his surname, and it was called Pig Iron. And they said, we were not going to publish that book because who's going to be interested in a working-class character from a small northern town? That small northern town was Durham, the theological capital of Europe for 2,500 years. And why wouldn't anyone want to read about a working-class character? And it's that sense of, because we are unfamiliar with people's lives that we haven't experienced or even want to kind of know about, no one's going to want to read it. And that is it's limiting for the commissioning editor at Picador at that time, but it's also limiting on the industry because there are millions of people who would love to read about that. And we proved them wrong by publishing Pig Iron. It went on to win the inaugural a prize published by kind of New Writing North, the Gordon Byrne Prize. His second book, Beastings, won a £10,000 Portico Literature Prize. His third book, The Gallows Pole, won a £25,000 historical fiction prize. And so they've missed out on, one, earning some money, but also a writer's career that they could still have now that, perhaps he may go on to win even bigger prizes. And that is just, I don't understand, even from a business sense.
Yes.
From a cultural sense, it makes me very angry. But from a business sense, it doesn't make any business sense.
No, absolutely.
Because we're all about selling books. But when we first started, I used to kind of throw the northern bombs down at the literary reviewers in London and say, we're from Manchester, we're proud to be northern, blah, blah, blah. And then when you get interested, I didn't then want to continue to do that because we are more than just a regional publisher. We sell now in 82 countries. We publish authors from around the world. We're based in the north, but we're international. Yeah. And it's taken London quite a long time to understand that. And to an extent where we didn't even bother about London. And perhaps this is kind of the arrogance of the swaggering Mancunian, but I just thought London will catch up eventually, and they have. Yeah. I just think they're a fantastic story. I want to find stories written by people whose experiences are completely different to mine. Because I want to understand their lives, and there's nothing better than, at the end of the day, if you had a crappy day, than jumping into a world that you know nothing about. And I don't mean kind of other planets, and finding out how people deal with issues, and that's what we're all trying to do, isn't it?
It's one of these slightly odd things, isn't it? That I know my experiences, so I don't need to read about them.
Yeah. We published a book by a Canadian author called Adrian Barnes in 2012.
Uh-huh.
It's called Nod, and it's about people get up in Vancouver, no one slept and no one dies, and it's about kind of after 6 days the brain shuts. You get your roast. After 28 days you die because your brain can't reconfigure. And I just read it as just a fantastic story, but the science fiction world picked up on it, and it was shortlisted for the Arthur C. Clarke Award, and then it became a kind of dystopian bestseller. But I just read it as a fantastic story, and then suddenly the SF world pick up on it, and it goes in a completely different direction. If I'd have read it as particularly a science fiction, I might have thought, well, we don't publish science fiction. But we just I read it as a fantastic story about something I didn't know that too much about.
Well, let's pivot a little bit back to the business itself. When you first set up Bluemoose, you'd obviously been working in the industry for a while, but you've been working for other people.
Yeah.
How did you go about kind of learning how to run a business yourself?
I think I was led by the contacts I'd made.
Okay.
So I knew I could get in front of people who made decisions to buy books. Mm-hmm. And I think that's when people ask me about setting up publishing. And one of the most important things is it's great setting up a publishing company, but you actually got to sell things. You've got to sell the book.
The bottom line.
That's it. So I did have an address book with lots of people I knew. And so I was led by, I drove the business through sales. Uh-huh. So 12 months before we published a particular book, I would find a Waterstones manager that I knew liked this particular type of book, get them passionate about the story 6-7 months before we published it, and then they would sell it within the Waterstones community because they were just so energized about this particular book. So they were selling the book and Bluemoose at the same time.
Yeah.
So I then didn't have to go and visit 300 Waterstones because they would do that at regional meetings and national meetings.
Yeah, get your internal champions on your side there.
And that's worked. But that came from 10 or 15 years of going around the country speaking to various managers and account directors and things like that. So the business was driven by that, really, sales. And it has to be. I think when I first got I initiated when we first started at Headline in the mid-'80s, and there was such a demarcation between editorial and sales, and they both hated each other that the sales thought that the editorials were far too snobbish and elitist, and the editors didn't even think that you had to sell a book. And I initiated a plan where once a month the editors had to go out with the sales reps just to speak to booksellers who were selling our books, but also speak to readers. And there was a lot of resistance initially, but it became one of the most successful things within Headline, I think, where editors were realizing, some of the jacket covers or what they were putting on the books didn't work, and it was a real plus. And just getting them out of the office and realizing that it is a business. It is a business.
Yeah.
And selling isn't a dirty word.
No. That's something I discovered when I started this business, that I'd never been in sales before, but it turns out that it's not all rubbish.
No,
he says politely. There's a logic to it. There's a process, and there's a discipline, and it's not just about hawking your wares or whatever.
No.
So but what about the rest of it? You had the sales side down. How did you cope with the finance and the legal and the editorial and this kind of stuff?
Well,
how did you start
the editorial? Heather, my wife, she's a solicitor.
Okay.
And she works for Thomson Reuters, which is a massive organisation. Yeah. And she runs a team of legal editors. So she already had a kind of editorial experience. Okay. On the legal side. So Lynn Webb is one of is our senior editor, is my mother-in-law, and she just reads and reads and reads. Yeah. So she just started off slowly editing some of our authors, guided by Heather. And I don't know whether you would agree, but I just think the best editors are those editors that have learnt on the job, as it were.
You've got to learn by doing.
Yeah, and so we had the legal side sorted, and we had the editorial start up with Lynn and Heather. And on the kind of, because I didn't know anything about kind of production or printing, there's a company in Lancaster called Carnegie Publishing. And so I went and met them, and they do all our typesetting
Okay.
and pagination, and also the production. They will then send out quotes to all the printers in the UK and get the best quote for us. So the production side of it was sort of, we pay a little bit of a premium on the typesetting, but they look after the production, so I don't have to worry about printing.
You just outsource that side.
Outsourced, yeah. And all our designers are freelance.
Mm-hmm.
So in-house is editorial, and I do all the sales and marketing and PR.
Yeah.
And I think you have in a business, you have to know your own limitations.
Definitely, yeah.
And don't try and do something that you're not good at.
So what is it that what do you find hardest about running the business?
Running, the day-to-day, it's obviously money, getting paid, getting books into promotions on the high street when you're competing against corporate publishers who are offering mad discounts to get their books on the shelves. They're buying shelf space, and it's the competition for shelf space within the high street. Mm-hmm. To some extent, all our authors' books are in the high street, but I, to some extent, use the high street just as a shop window. Mm-hmm. Because we sometimes can't afford the massive discounts that they demand. We do promotions, obviously, with all the high street booksellers. But where we, I think, are successful is working with the independent sector. Mm-hmm. And we have had phenomenal success with our books, with independent bookshops throughout the UK and Ireland. Yeah, we're offering them a bit more discount than the wholesalers. And we champion them, they champion us, and it's like a mutual recognition society. But I also think readers are now becoming more discerning and realise that perhaps the book of the month at a particular high street bookseller has got there because the publisher's offered them more discount or has paid for that spot. And initially, when we first started, we worked hand in hand with with libraries around the kind of UK because you've got free space, they've got book clubs, so you've got access to readers. You've got a space free of charge. You just turn up with your author with some books, and you will sell lots of books. Now, one of the most frightening things within UK publishing is the demise of the library budget. Yeah. We probably wouldn't survive if we set up Bluemoose today, because I always said to our new writers, it's almost like being a band when you're 16 or 17. You have to get out on the road. I would say we went on an international book tour of Northern Libraries. Mm-hmm. But it was a way of getting readership, and word of mouth. Word of mouth is still the best way to sell books. So my thinking is if we can get 50 to 100 readers from a library event, get them impassioned about the book and the author, they will then go and tell 5, 10 of their friends. So exponentially that's your sales and marketing campaign. It sounds, pretty simple, but if you can do that with 20 libraries, that's 2,000 people. And that could be your print run sold. Yeah.
So as you kind of have gone through this whole process, what have you learned about yourself over the last 10, 12 years of running the business yourself?
I think the biggest thing is when you start, and it was a kind of a one-person band at the beginning, there is a bit of control freak. You've got to let go sometimes. Yeah. And that is sometimes a difficulty, because you're thinking, will they do, and this is where the arrogance is, but will they do as good a job as I do? And you think, well, perhaps I'm not doing a very good job. And I think it's letting go of certain things. And people are more qualified and better to do the things that you think you are good at, and just it's realizing your own limitations sometimes, and which is weird when you're starting, because not that you think you can do everything, but you have to kind of delegate. You do have to delegate, at some point.
Yeah. And what is it then that keeps you coming back to it every day, keeping going with Bluemoose?
If I go back to, say, a year ago, on my inbox, there was an email from someone I didn't know, and in the header it was just Leonard and Hungry Paul by Ronan Hession, and I just thought, that's a weird title for a book. And I just started reading, and I just thought, wow, this person is so accomplished, and this is a debut book. And that's what gets me up every morning, because I might find another Leonard and Hungry Paul, I might find another kind of Ben Myers. That's what, every morning when I turn on the computer, I'm thinking, what exciting things. A bit like Tigger, winning a book. What exciting things are going to happen today? And that's what is just brilliant, because at least 2 or 3 times a year, I find something that just kind of bowls me over. And then you just want to share that. I think people don't realize how powerful stories are and how they can help people,
Yeah, excellent.
And just make their day a bit better.
Well, yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Kevin. That's been a fascinating conversation.
All right, brilliant. Cheers, John.
This was Talking Through My Hat, a podcast by John Pettigrew, founder of We Are Futureproofs. Please let me know your thoughts by leaving a review at Apple Podcasts or by commenting on the website, myhat.wearefutureproofs.com. You can subscribe to this channel at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Our theme music is from hooksounds.com.